Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm super excited today to bring you our next guest interview for Growing Tall Poppies. And it's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome my amazing and treasured friend, Dr. Hayley Kelly, to chat with us today. She has so generously offered to share her experiences and her many words of wisdom with us. And to add another layer to today's guest, she is also my brilliant mentor and wise guide who I look up to and admire so deeply. I must say it does feel a little weird being the host in our interview and being in the privileged and different position of holding space for her. So let me introduce Dr. Hayley to you all. Dr. Hayley Kelly has a PhD and master's degree in clinical psychology, a coaching certification from the International Coaching Federation, and she has spent over a decade refining her expertise. As the founder of Therapists Rising, Dr. Hayley Kelly extends her influence beyond traditional therapy through group coaching, dynamic online training, and webinars, as well as hosting the acclaimed Therapists Rising podcast. Dr. Kelly has won multiple awards, secured investment backing, a rarity for women-led startups, and her keynotes, workshops, and programs blend strategy and foresight, urging mental health professionals to embrace new models for growth, clinician sustainability, and client care. With programs like the Incubator and the Collective Mastermind, she advocates for financial and time freedom, moving the mental health profession towards a future where therapists are unshackled from conventional constraints. Welcome, Hayley. It's so great to have you here.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful way to start this conversation. And I think the mutual admiration is definitely there. I love and adore you and treasure the friendship that we have, and equally feel so privileged to be part of your story, your journey.
Thank you. Make my heart melt. Oh, so can we just start, Hayley, with you giving us just a brief introduction of who you are and what amazing things you do in the world?
Certainly can. I tend to be very long-winded, and I really like to add flair and context to my story, so hopefully I can stay on target here. But I am Dr. Hayley Kelly. I am a clinical psychologist by trade and training who pivoted into creating online programs. So I'm now firmly in the seat of running a really crazy, amazing business called Therapists Rising, which is supporting other therapists to create online programs and to expand their impact and build businesses and practices that give them their time back while impacting the world. So that's pretty much what I do.
In a nutshell. Very good. Wasn't long-winded at all, was
it? You just gave me permission, though.
Always. You know, I like to waffle elegantly. I remember a year 8 teacher of mine once saying to me, "Oh, Nat, you waffle so elegantly." Thanks for that. He'd be laughing at me now, knowing that I'm now podcasting and I get to talk. So as we know, with my guest interviews, they're around speaking with people who've experienced trauma or some sort of adversity in their life and how they've navigated that experience with any of the lessons and the learnings that they've got out of that experience as a result, and any pearls of wisdom that they can share with us so we can all move forward and learn how to thrive in post-traumatic growth. So I'm wondering if you could share an overview of what's happened for you and what you've been through, Hayley.
Yeah, I feel like this is a very long winded story in and of itself. But I guess when I look back on my life, there have absolutely been moments of what I would classify as big T traumas,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm certainly well aware of and probably aren't overly relevant to the story right now. But what I am very aware of is that I was an undiagnosed neurodivergent individual for the vast majority of my life. So I was only recently diagnosed as autistic ADHD. And that was just before I turned 40. I had two kids before that diagnosis. So life was sort of happening. And it wasn't until I received that diagnosis and had time to, I guess, reflect on it and integrate it into my identity. One of the things that I've become really aware of is how my life has been littered with, I guess, traumatic events that now make sense because they've been related to the way that my brain is wired and the fact that I didn't fit in and that I've always been quite different.
Mm.
And these experiences led very much to me believing and having this narrative of myself and holding this identity that I was broken. There was something really wrong with me. And on top of that, these continued, I guess, what I would probably consider like micro traumas in differences in communication or being, directly pointed at as being different, not being able to fit in. I think that has been the overlay across my entire life, pretty much. And I think for people who are listening that might be not neurodivergent, either autistic, ADHD, or any of the other spectrums that exist there, I think they will understand the landscape that lays over your life. One of the things I think that it really led to, which was a really pivotal turning point in my life, and I know you know this story, Nat, but becoming a psychologist was a really important life journey decision that I worked really, really hard to do, to get to become registered, do all the things. And lo and behold, I really struggled as a psychologist. I really struggled to sit in a therapy chair, to work one-to-one, to perform and do all of the things that were expected of me, to keep up with case notes, all of the things, right?
Mm.
And it took a massive, massive toll on me. And I think it takes a massive toll on so many of us. But now I understand that it took such a toll on me because of the way that my brain is wired. And there was one particular moment which I refer to as like, it's my head in the bucket moment. And it was the moment of sitting on the floor in the kitchen. I've got a full clinic day ahead, and I'm literally in the midst of a panic attack. And I'm sitting with my head in a bucket and I'm dry reaching as my son, who was, I think he was about 2 at the time, is watching on and he's got his hand on his shoulder and he's like saying, "Mummy, are you okay?" And it was that moment where I'm just like, this job it's killing me.
Yeah, very much so by the sound of it, to go from, coping as well as you did with all the adversities and all the issues that were going on in your life, not knowing why. And you still got there. You were still a psychologist. And then this goal and this dream that you'd been working so hard towards was falling apart.
Yeah.
And you were not in a position at that point, I imagine, sitting on the floor with your head in a bucket, of having the capacity to go, "Oh shit, what do I do now? How do I get out of this? How do I change it?"
Yeah, it was definitely the moment when I sort of reflect back on, obviously that spanned multiple years. And you and I both know that being a therapist comes with its own set of very, very unique challenges in terms of vicarious trauma and the weight of holding the emotional content of sessions. It takes a toll on us. And I think it just took extra toll because of the life history that I brought into the therapy room. And I didn't even know. I didn't even know that that was why it was having such a toll, that it was feeling like such a burden. But I think in that moment, that was like the pivotal moment of the entire experience. And I call that experience exceptionally traumatic for so many reasons. But that visceral memory of sitting there on the floor and feeling my son's hand on my shoulder and not being able to say, yeah, mummy's okay, because I absolutely wasn't. But that was the moment that it just almost changed everything. And yes, it took a long time to move myself out of that, but that was the defining moment of like, something has to change here.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot, don't we? And you would know in your previous role as a clinical psychologist and mine too, that we hear all the traumas and all the things that we hear, and we just know that that person has usually hit rock bottom. That's how they usually term it when they've moved forward and they can look back and go, wow, that was my rock bottom. So that was definitely your rock bottom moment. And and I guess for you then, how did you cope with that when you were in it? Obviously, not quite as well as what you would be, a week, 2 weeks down the track from it. How did you cope with that there and then?
So there and then in that moment, I literally had to, like, I actually felt a sense of relief. I think it
Yeah.
came with that realization of like, this is not working. Like this, it cannot go on the way that it is. And you're absolutely right in like that moment of rock bottom, the sharp clarity that comes when you've made the decision, right? So when that insight comes, when the decision is made of this can no longer exist in the way that it is,
Mm-hmm.
I did immediately feel a sense of relief. Now, for the woo woos and the non woo woos, what I did next was I marched my butt up. I got myself off the floor with this sense of conviction of like, I'm going to do something about this. I don't know what it is, but I know it's going to change. And I walked with such a sense of conviction into the office. I was working at home then, into the office, and I pulled a tarot card from my oracle deck.
Mm-hmm.
And the card that came out was basically a change card.
Yeah.
And it was that sense of validation of, okay. So I think the actual card was crossroads, the crossroads moment. And I was like,
Interesting.
I get it. And I took a picture on my phone. I was like, this is crazy, ridiculous. How's the irony? Oh my gosh. But it was that sense of validation of like, oh, and I think pulling that card from the deck was just an extra layer of conviction that came from that.
Yeah.
Like
So another
I'm not the
sign,
victim of this anymore.
yeah, a very clear sign that this is it. This is my moment.
Yeah,
And as you said, I am not a victim of this anymore. I will take charge, not knowing what it's going to look like, I'm imagining at the time, but I'm going to do this.
absolutely. And I think that that idea of I didn't even realize until that moment that I had been in that. And I think this is really normal. And there is absolutely zero judgment saying this, but it's that reality of continually giving my power over to the bad thing that's happening in my life. Right. And we all go through that. I think that's part and parcel of the journey, and part and parcel of the growth of that is disentangling yourself from the relationship that you have with the thing that's hurting you. Right. And being able
Absolutely.
to say, I take my power back from this. I'm the one who gets to decide what happens next, how I show up in this moment. And the sense of relief and determination for me that came with that was incredibly profound.
I imagine it was. So tell me a bit more about that.
In terms of the profoundness, in terms of the
Yeah.
shift, I think it was, I think if I reflect back, I was absolutely caught in this relational dynamic with the events that were happening in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and me sitting there and believing utterly that I could not do anything about it because it felt like I was trapped. And I think that's part of the pain, right? Of like, I
Yes.
don't have any options. I can't do anything else. And the reality being, and again, this comes from a place of compassion, because I think we all have to go through that experience of being disempowered, right?
Yes, I
Because it's
agree.
the very definition of trauma, right? Is
Hmm.
that it literally overpowers us,
Yeah, and
right?
we lose
That's
that sense of control. We have no control
exactly,
in that instant.
exactly. Yeah, that sense of autonomy, that sense of sovereignty, that sense of control. And it's in that moment that I realized, you know what, as much as I had been, the relational part of it felt as though the things that were happening held the control, right?
Mm.
That it
Yep,
was
yep,
impacting me.
yep.
But the moment of clarity was, actually, I'm the one who has control. I'm the one who gets to decide if I continue to stay in this same relational pattern,
Hmm.
that I continue showing up in the same way and struggling in the same way. Like, what if I said no? Like, what if I said no more? What if I showed up differently from this place of internalized power and control?
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a sense of liberation, I think, that comes with that. And I know not everyone gets to that point, but geez, it was profound.
Mm. Oh, it sounds like it was life changing when you got to that realization. So, Hayley, tell me, when you look back with the benefit of hindsight, of course, do you believe you've changed as far as who you are, your identity, as a result of that? And then later on, I'm guessing that that was again pre neurodivergence diagnosis. Yeah. So, and once you got that diagnosis as well.
Absolutely. I think how I view that moment, and again, this was not present at the time and it is only the benefit of hindsight. I can absolutely see that I needed to go through this, that it has played a really pivotal role in who I have become only because I experienced what I experienced. It was a necessary part of my growth, my evolution, the path that I needed to walk. And in that sense, I'm really grateful. And I would absolutely never change the things that I went through, even though there were some incredibly, incredibly dark moments.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of how it changed me, was that internalized sense of power and control led me down a completely different path than I could have ever imagined. So it changed me in the sense of, I get to make a decision here. And when I started making decisions, and what I call, and I know you love this phrase too, Nat, like when I start following the breadcrumbs.
Can I just interrupt you there? Everyone's heard me talk in all my episodes about following the breadcrumbs, and I was going to make reference to it later, but thank you for raising that. Hayley is my follow the breadcrumbs person. So it gives me great pleasure in having you mention that, because yes,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are a guru at following the breadcrumbs. And I think you've highlighted that so beautifully, that there've been things through your life where you thought, you felt broken, but now with the benefit of hindsight as to why, and how transitioning in a world where you felt like the square peg in the round hole, it all made sense once you had the hindsight to recognize why they were the
Yes.
breadcrumbs. So the same as what you're saying now. So sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry I interrupted. Back to your breadcrumbs.
It was a beautifully placed interruption. You should definitely not apologize. But I think that idea of it really opened me up to seeing my life as controllable by me, right? I am the master of my own destiny. I get to choose my own adventure. I am the one who needs to start taking ownership and responsibility over the life that I'm creating. And I started to follow the breadcrumbs of, I wonder where this is leading, or like just that sense of intuition that comes, right, of like, I think this is the next step, and just seeing where it's going to go and unfold. But I think, as you've mentioned, that idea of the square peg in the round hole, I think one of the things that has come from this in terms of an identity shift is, now I own the fact that I am actually like diagnosed square peg round hole.
I love that. I love it. And I can guarantee you that a lot of our listeners can so relate to that.
Mm.
And whether they're neurodivergent or not, there's many periods, often during their trauma journey, where they've felt like a square peg in a round hole. And, as you know very well, I'm sure I have ADHD, undiagnosed. However, it comes as an asset as well in some ways, also
Mm.
not so in others. But yes, definitely. And I think a lot of the reasons why we've struggled through our traumas has been impacted even further by that. So for you to follow those breadcrumbs is very powerful and a huge clue for us that that's something that we can do if we're not quite at the post-traumatic growth phase too.
Absolutely. And I think this wasn't a concept that I just like miraculously stumbled upon in that growth phase. Again, is as I look back in hindsight, the breadcrumbs were always there and I was always following them. But now it's just that I'm so much more intentional now with looking for the breadcrumbs and really making empowered decisions in terms of I'm going to step towards the breadcrumb, right? But even in terms of the breadcrumbs around, I get now why I struggled the way that I did. And I get the fact that I owned this identity that it was a me problem, right? So I'm the broken one. It's a me problem. I don't fit in. Everyone else is doing so much better than me. No one struggles in the same way that I do. Clearly, there is something wrong with me. And when I received the diagnosis, the shift in identity. So I'd already had this massive shift in terms of that sense of responsibility that I have over crafting my life. So that was that profound moment of like, oh shit, I'm in control of this. Like I'm going to choose the direction of my life. But then the diagnosis, just adding that extra layer of my God, the profound identity shift when I received that diagnosis, and that like the idea of your life flashing before your eyes, it's like
Mm.
all of these experiences that had happened in my life. I'm like, oh my God, they all make complete and utter sense now. Complete and
Wow.
utter sense. And that sense of forgiveness that I was able to then cultivate in terms of like forgiveness, self compassion towards my past self, because
Yes.
she had absolutely no idea, right? She was doing the very, very best that she could with what she had. And so being able to hold her so gently
Mm.
in every decision that she made, in every breadcrumb that she followed, because she was doing the very best that she could with what she had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you talked then about your past self, your younger self, your past self. What would you want to say to her right now if you could have a conversation with her, Hayley?
And it always makes me so emotional. And I think you've heard me, Nat, speak about my past self and just how much compassion I have for her. And I get really emotional when I bring her into my presence, when I remember her and feel her. And that sense of, if I could protect you from what's to come, I would jump in front of the train for you. But at the same time, knowing she has to experience the adversity because I wouldn't be here otherwise. Right.
Yeah.
So I have a profound sense of admiration. I have a profound sense of pride in her that she was able to do the things that she did with what she had. I wish I could protect her, but at the same time, I'm very realistic in knowing that that would circumvent the life that we've been creating.
Yeah.
And so I guess I would say to her, I know that this really, really sucks, and you will be okay. We will be okay.
How beautiful. That is a very powerful moment, and I'm so grateful that you shared that. And I think, in so many ways, you just hit the nail on the head in that we may look back and think, oh gosh, if only I could change that. And when we've been through trauma, we think, oh, why? I wish that hadn't happened. The reality is, when you really move through and into post traumatic growth, we all see that the lessons and the learnings and the shit that we've been through all have been gifts. They may not feel like gifts along the way that we were given that have helped us become the person we are now. And I love the way you put
Yeah.
that gratitude towards her, that past version of Hayley, who without her, you couldn't be who you are today, this amazing, wonderful leader that we all look up to and that we're so grateful for because of who you are and what you've been through.
Yeah, I'm really like it does there is that sense of visceral ambivalence that I experience because when you're on the other side of this, when you're in that growth phase and you have that 2020 hindsight, you know that the person who is going through the pits of hell, they don't see that. Like there is no light at the end of the tunnel the majority of the time. And everything in their being just wants to escape that moment. Like I don't think we really have that concept of this will get better at that point.
Absolutely.
It's just too painful. And so there is that sense of ambivalence of when we talk about this stuff, how do we talk about it in a way, even if I was to approach my past self, how would I talk about this in a way that doesn't detract from the utter pain that she's experiencing, that she just wants to be over?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I hear a lot of the time and in all my years of trauma work, and you would have too, is a lot of the time the most important part is acknowledgement. Acknowledging it is shit right now. And a lot of people often struggle with that. They say that people didn't get it around them. I just wanted it to be acknowledged. So one of the things about, working in the area of the post-traumatic growth and the coaching side of things as you're doing now is that it enables you to have the benefit of hindsight, but also the benefit of the experience you've been through because you can make sure you change that for other people.
Or at least hold that space,
Yeah.
right? Like I have no expectation that you are going to hear this, feel this, believe that it's true. But I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to be with you in it because it sucks. You're absolutely right. I know it's going to get better and you probably can't see that. That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And just acknowledging that and being with them where they're at is essential. And we know that if they can persevere and keep going, those learnings and those lessons will come. And then we can look back and go, now I know why and how and what and all the things. So if you look back now, how have these experiences transformed your perspective on life, on relationships, and your personal values now, living as a neurodivergent woman who's well and truly come to terms with that and openly speaking about it and sharing so many other gifts in the world as a result?
That's a great question. I guess the big thing for me is like I absolutely have redefined life as where once I probably, again, very subconsciously, it certainly wasn't a conscious decision that I was making, but I viewed life as that I was a passenger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Life was in the driver's seat. I was in the passenger.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a say over where things were going. I could do like, oh, do you want to just take a left turn there? Or, oh, there's our exit over there. Like you could do some things to control your life or steer the direction of your life. But in reality, I was very much a passenger in my own life. And I think the thing that has dramatically changed off the back of these experiences is that sense of this is my life. And if it is my life, then I get to make decisions about what it's going to look like, feel like, be like. And sometimes I'm going to get it wrong and it's going to go crap. And that's okay because it's still my choice.
Yes.
Right. So live and die by the sword.
Mm-hmm.
So the intentionality that I now bring to my life, and that infects every part of my life. And again, I am certainly not the Dalai Lama when it comes to living an intentional life. I
You're
sometimes
not?
get it very wrong.
Oh,
No, as much as I
okay.
would, as much as I might project otherwise, no, I'm definitely not. And sometimes it goes utterly wrong. And sometimes I will work on the wrong things, thinking that it's the right thing and, all the things. But this overarching sense of conscious decision making, conscious awareness, conscious creation of my life. that I try to bring to every part of my life, whether it's parenting, the creation of my business, how I show up for my students and my mentees, how I'm showing up in every facet of my life. It stems now from this sense of control that I have, that I am going to intentionally decide today what it looks like. I think that has been a very, very profound that's been a very profound shift for me, and I think has dramatically changed the course of my life and the sense of ownership and agency that I now have over everything, like the good, the bad, and everything in between. I now have a sense of agency of like, oh, that didn't go very well. Try that again.
Make a different choice because you can.
Exactly. But in the same vein, I think this is one of my life lessons, in the sense that I'm very aware that that tendency to hand over responsibility that is obviously very deeply seated in my sense of self-worth, that had been deeply impacted by my experiences in life. There is a tendency to slip sometimes back into handing over responsibility to other people in my life. So my marriage in particular. So handing responsibility over to Rob and not even realizing that it's happening. And I think this will be the life lesson. Like I've made peace with it. This is what I'm here to learn.
I'll keep learning those lessons.
And they just keep coming in different shapes and different forms. And I used to be like, didn't I already learn this? God damn it. And I've now just got to the point of acceptance of, all right, I get it, life. This is the lesson that I'm here for in this lifetime. So I think that's been a really dramatic shift for me. And I think off the back of that, again, if I look back over the last, say, 5-ish years, probably a little bit more than that, 5 to 7 years, when the shit hit the royal fan, the nature of my life utterly changed. So it almost accelerated. So the success in the business, the success in me showing up as a parent, like all of the domains of my life seemed to just click. Again, it doesn't always click. Clicking is sometimes not great, but in the vast majority of my life, yeah, absolutely. And I had been doing some of these things pre that shift.
Yeah.
But none of them just seemed to, like, my online programs were going, but they weren't great. Right. So I was working towards it, but it was still hard and all the things. But that sort of moment was almost like it was a catalyst for acceleration in my life. And things seem to have sped up. And my capacity to hold that has also increased as a byproduct.
Interesting. That's a really great insight. Thank you for sharing that. Because I'm sure that our listeners will also, if they look closely and carefully, see where that has happened for them as well. Once they make that decision, that things can accelerate in a really good way. And if things don't go so well, you can course correct and keep going as long as you're moving forward. And you can never move back once you have that insight because you're not the same person.
No, I call that the point of no return, that the moment, or it's called the event horizon, right? So I was part of my neurodivergent flair was that I was hyper fixated at some point in my very early 20s on astronomy and space. And I loved the ideas of the event horizon, right? So that point of no return where light gets to the edge and the gravitational pull of whatever it is tips it over. So it can now no longer escape. It is in the gravitational pull of whatever the body is around it. That's what I think about when you talk about that idea of the point of no return, right? You can never go back.
No.
Once you have these moments, these insights, these epiphanies, these light bulbs, nothing is ever the same again. Like you cannot undo these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing.
No, absolutely.
And it's so well in so many ways.
Absolutely, because I mean the fallout from it can be really painful, right? So in the sense of like if you're in a crappy relationship and you have that moment of insight where you're like, this is not working and it has to change, and now you can no longer unsee that.
Yeah.
Then the ramifications of this insight is that your life is probably going to get chaotic for a period of time. And that can be really painful. And absolutely, when I look back on that event horizon, that point of no return, the head in the bucket for me, it didn't just like life didn't just go, fantastic, you're on board. There
Woohoo!
you go. It's all
All fixed.
sweet, right? Like I actually had to do a lot of hard work and there was so much pain that still was there. But now I had a sense of purpose. Now I understood the context of the pain. So the pain becomes so much more bearable. You're like, I get it.
Absolutely.
I get that this is hard and I get that it's uncomfortable, but the thing on the other side of the pain is worth the effort. So I'm willing to endure it. And I think that's missing for us when we're deep in the pits of the trauma response and experience, is that we don't get the context of the pain. We're
No.
just like, this sucks.
Mm.
And I want it to
Awful, and I
stop.
want out. I can't deal with it anymore. It has to stop because I'm not able to cope with it. But what we know is if we're able to ride it out and keep going, this is the sort of thing that's on the other side that can
Mm.
bring you hope and a sense of, as you said, a sense of purpose. Yeah. So Hayley, one of the things that I've been doing in the episodes that I've done so far, and as we work through and do more and more episodes, is looking for the breadcrumbs so that we can tie those together and see, what do you think are the specific qualities or personal attributes or inner strengths, whatever it is that you want to say, that you see key for moving through trauma and into post-traumatic growth for you, but also maybe in some of the clients you've worked with, some of your students like us. What are the specific qualities, things that, it might be grit, determination, whatever it is that you think have gotten you where you are and others?
Yeah, I think I would absolutely identify as tenacious and gritty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that has served me exceptionally well. So I think I have a natural tendency to see pain and suffering as necessary parts of the journey. And I'm like, okay, just get through the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just get through the thing. And I can see that even in my non-traumatic experiences in life when I was marathon running, for example, where it would be like, I know what's coming. I know what's coming. So that sense of grit, determination, tenacity, I
Mm-hmm.
think are incredibly useful in this way.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that the ability to see yourself as a small part in a big picture,
Yeah.
and that sense of, I guess people would call it spirituality, connection to a higher source, God, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the sense that I've had since I've been very, very young is that I'm very, very small, like a very small part in this large picture.
Mm.
And at one point, I would have labeled that as God. At this point in time, it's sort of life or the universe. But it's that sense of I am connected to something that is so much greater than I am,
Yeah.
right? And the ability to connect with that, I think, is, and I'm pretty sure there's probably some research that I vaguely remember reading at some point in time, that that sense of connection to something greater, whether it's spirituality, is a protective factor. So
Yes.
finding that sense of connection, I think, is a really important part of the growth experience as well. And you can correct me if I'm wrong in saying that, Nat. You certainly know much better than I do.
Absolutely. You are not wrong at all. And interestingly, in one of I think it was the second podcast episode that I did, I talked about post traumatic growth. It might have been the third. And one of the things there was around spirituality. And I remember thinking when I was first recording it, oh gosh, people are going to listen to that and think I'm only talking about God. But it's exactly as you've said, it's something greater than ourselves. Our connection is about, doesn't matter who or what the connection is with, but that is an inner quality and an outer quality helping us guide us through. And I think that's our intuition and our gut brain, which I've done a lot of research on about that inner knowing that there's something beyond us is absolutely what will help us move into post-traumatic growth in a more accelerated and long-term way.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think the thing that I ponder is whether could this be, could that thing that we're talking about in terms of spirituality, which is obviously very nebulous, it's very abstract, could we use community in the same way? So if you're not spiritual, if you don't have that sense of connection to something higher, grander, whatever it might be, I feel like we could potentially recreate that in community with others, right? So being part of a community that's greater than us, where we're just one part of the organism, the whole, and that there are people there that have our back, right? So that sense of hope,
Absolutely.
the sense of connectedness that comes with community, I could imagine would be similar. Again, this is just a hypothesis, but I could imagine that would be a similar experience to what we talk about when we talk about spirituality.
I agree, completely agree. And I think, yeah, it might be theory, but I think, more and more we're seeing this. And I think, if we go back to, COVID, we lost that sense of community. There was a lot of disconnection. So we're trying to get that back and build community. And I think at no point ever has community and support been more important and necessary. And that's what we were missing and we craved the most.
Mm. And it makes a lot of sense, right? That relational experience that I can see is present in someone's spiritual beliefs, right? We're connected. It's relational. I'm connected to something else other than me, and how important that is. I think the other thing, as I reflect on this, that I think has come in very handy. And again, I thank the neurodivergent part of me when I say this, but my tendency to be very what is the word? I don't want to say disruptive. I'm probably very disruptive. There's probably a part of me that is a bit of a jerk. And if someone's like, you can't do this, I will be like, hold my beer. You watch me. Challenge accepted. So there's this part of me that gets very determined if there is an obstacle placed in my way, whether that's self-imposed, other imposed, doesn't really matter. But that sense of like, well, you said I can't, so I'm going to just have to do the thing. And I think that part of me has probably served me very well in this journey of like, well, I'm just not going to give up. Like, if I have to hustle, if I have to work, if I've got to do the work, if I've got to work hard, if you're going to put blocks in the way, I'm going to do everything I can to prove it wrong.
Absolutely. And there again is that tenacity and grit. So they are definitely two qualities that you see that have gotten you through, but can also be shared with our listeners to make sure that they can look at, we've all got it within, I'm sure. How can I find that? Where have I hidden it? If I haven't accessed it for a long time, how can I activate that again?
Definitely.
So
Definitely. And I think these
amazing.
are learned skills. Like if I'm sort of, well, I guess some of it would be innate in terms of the way that my brain is wired. But I think a lot of the research would suggest that these are learnable skills.
Yeah.
And that's really hopeful for so many people of like, oh, well, I'm not neurodivergent. That's cool. No problem. Like these are absolutely scientifically validated, learnable skills for you. You can acquire these.
Most definitely. And I think, that's what the aim of my whole project is about looking at where are the breadcrumbs, what are they, and what can we share with our listeners so they can see whereabouts they need to dig within themselves or outside themselves to learn to help move them through and into post-traumatic growth. Because once you get there, as we can all see with you, Hayley, life can be so much different and so much better. And if you hadn't backed yourself and, as you said, hadn't experienced that awful, awful moment, those lessons and learnings wouldn't have shaped you into the human you are today.
Yeah, I certainly feel so much gratitude for It sounds so silly to say that, doesn't it? I feel so much gratitude for the traumatic experiences that I went through, but it is utterly true that I feel that sense of gratitude. And I think the other thing that I would just add as a closing, and I've sort of talked about this, and I feel like this is really relevant, that the firmer that I've planted myself into my sense of purpose, the more unwavering I am in my commitment to weathering the storm. So
Absolutely.
it doesn't matter what happens in life now. Like, yucky stuff is going to happen, bad crap's going to happen, and it will continue to happen because that is life.
Mm-hmm.
But the more firmly rooted I am in that sense of purpose and meaning, and that I'm here to bring something to life, I'm here to fulfill on a purpose and a mission, then it's sort of like, all right, well, I guess this is the crap soup that we're dealing with today, but the why is always bigger, always.
Absolutely. What a huge share. You know, what a gift you've given us by sharing that knowledge and that awareness. So, Hayley, as we move to wrapping the conversation up, where can our listeners find out more about you and find you online?
Sure, let's do that. So I'm at therapistrising.com is the website. You can find me at Dr. So Dr. Hayley Kelly on Instagram. I think I'm on the same at Facebook. That was terrible English, wasn't it? Over on the Facebooks and the Grams. And I've got a podcast called the Therapist Rising Podcast as well.
You do. And it's always full of many pearls of wisdom. So, yeah, I will put that in the show notes and make sure that everyone can find you and connect with you and enjoy that as much as I've enjoyed connecting with you. So, is there anything else as we get to the last few minutes of it, Hayley, that you would like to share, or is all your wisdom already imparted for our listeners?
No, it's more a reflection of you, Nat. Like, this is such an important conversation to be having. I don't think the idea of post-traumatic growth is spoken about enough. And I think there is potentially even some stigma around post-traumatic growth, in the sense of, you can't talk about growth because the people stuck in trauma aren't going to feel that. And that's where that dissonance that we talked about earlier comes from. But the fact that you're giving this a platform and a voice for people to speak about their experiences, to share the wisdom that has come out of it. Everyone has a story. And the more that we can give platforms to people in terms of like, here's the crap that I went through. I get that you're also going through this. Here are some of the tidbits that I have learned along the way. Here are some of the breadcrumbs that I managed to pick up and learn. And if one person hears that you have managed to get into the ears of, that changes their life, oh my gosh, like, this is incredible work that you're doing.
Thank you. And it really lights up my soul to be able to, as you said, if I could change the life of one person, my job is done.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I thank you for encouraging me and prodding me a little to get this podcast out there and believe that the mission was possible and necessary. So, yeah, I'm forever grateful to you for that. And I wanted to say a massive thank you for joining us today and sharing all those pearls of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being you. And I couldn't think of anyone better for this job than you.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. Thanks. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe And it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.